Well, while everybody's worried about the prospect of a hung parliament and minority government, some people are thinking about how we could possibly avoid this situation. One of them is Joel Fitzgibbon, the former Labor Defence Minister. He joins me now from Cessnock in New South Wales, Hunter Valley. Good to speak to you again, Joel. We haven't caught up since inauguration week in Washington, but you've been keeping your thinking cap on, and you're suggesting that the major parties ought to deal with this and just basically do a deal that whoever wins the most votes, the most seats in the lower house, can form government with the support of the other minor party. It's of the other major party. Sorry, it'd be a neat way to freeze out the Teals and the Greens.
It's a bit warmer here, Chris, than it was in DC. Yeah, look, I think it's a very simple proposition. I saw the last hung parliament up close as the chief government whip, and as I said in an article in the Australian recently, Rob Oakeshott, the Independent of the day, said that it would be ugly but beautiful in its ugliness, but it was just ugly. And those of us who lived it can attest to that. And we want to avoid that. It has a chilling effect on our economy as investors sit back wondering what's next. I mean, we waited 17 days last time to even form a government. We don't want to see a rerun of that. But nor do we want to be held ransom by Greens and other extreme left-wingers to form a government. And it just makes sense to me, and it seems more democratic to me, that the people who should decide who our next Prime Minister is are those who hold very large positions in the House of Representatives, those who shared, around 70% of the primary vote. We'll have 70% deciding who the next Prime Minister will be, rather than someone who attracted 10 or less % of the primary vote. But of course, I'm not talking about a coalition. I'm just talking about an arrangement in which the two leaders commit themselves to providing the person who has the most number of seats, not a majority, but the most number of seats, with both confidence and supply in the House for an 18-month period only, but only on one matter, and that is an agreed economic reform package, a package we so desperately need as a country. I just think hard reforms just getting too hard now for the major parties because they share such a low proportion of the primary vote, around 68% at the last election. So it's a good opportunity to turn what could be a disaster into something really special. That is an opportunity to get a significant reform package through the Parliament, both through the House and the Senate, which is a good point because even if one of them secured a majority in the House of Representatives, they're not going to have a majority in the Senate. So it's a great opportunity, in my view, and it would be a much better out. They can still fight about everything else they want to fight about. Every other bill that comes through the Parliament, they can block and play. But any bill that comes through, like a tax reform bill, for example, which is a tax reform bill which makes our tax system more internationally competitive and more efficient, if it comes through, major parties wave it through both the House and the Senate. Once that's done in 18 months' time, well, it's all bets off.
Yeah, of course it makes sense, but most people will say it's too far-fetched to actually happen. But my view is that you're onto something here because if we keep seeing this happening and our lower house is going to be as messy as the Senate for a long while to come, then it's the only way to get any sort of reform. If our economy keeps tanking, if our budget's out of control, no major party's ever going to be able to get reforms through a hung parliament. Unless the major parties actually work together, you won't see any of these serious problems tackled.
Exactly, and I made the point, and I made this point in the article the Australian published, I think, on Tuesday, that Hawke and Keating, I don't think, could achieve their significant economic reforms in today's environment. And I don't believe John Howard could win an election in 1998 promising to implement a GST in this environment. So there's an opportunity here by necessity, and the necessity is making sure the country is not held to ransom and the chilling effect that has in the investment community, an opportunity to work together on this one single thing, a reform package which would be agreed by consensus by the two party leaders, the state premiers, union leaders, industry leaders, community sector leaders, etc.
I just got to point out, though, as great as many of those economic reforms of Hawke and Keating were, they weren't opposed by the coalition. Howard and others,
some of them were, Chris.
They put them, most of them were waved through.
Fringe benefits tax
it was a bit more difficult for Howard getting the GST past Labor's opposition. I just want to show you something today about our current economic situation. It's a comment today in an interview with Ross Greenwood from the Orica boss, Sanjeev Gandhi. You might have had dealings with him up there in the Hunter. Here's what he says about doing business in Australia.
We are struggling, as every other manufacturer in this country is. High energy costs, high electricity costs, low productivity, high labour costs. So we need help. And I think it's a bit too late now to bring in more supply. I think what we do need is a reservation policy for gas for genuine manufacturers like Orica in this country.
Joel Fitzgibbon, it's one thing to whinge about Donald Trump's tariffs, but we're effectively putting an energy tariff on everybody who operates in this country with our high electricity costs and our high gas costs, all unnecessarily so.
The regulatory burden in this country and our energy cost in manufacturing in particular is out of control. But Chris, we don't need a reservation policy. We've got enough gas to last us 1,000 years. You know, if we can get all that out of the ground, then we can consume as much as we like cheaply and export as much as we like. We don't have to be allocating it to certain parts, to certain sectors within the local and global economies. We've just got to get, I mean, it took Narrabri, Santos's Narrabri project, but well, it's been 15 or 16 years in the making and it still hasn't been approved. And that's just one example.
Just to be clear, Joel Fitzgibbon, former Labor Minister, what you're saying is drill, baby, drill.
Well, I wouldn't use that term necessarily, but yeah, something like that.
Great stuff. Thanks for joining us, Joel.
People in my hotels and supermarkets just can't understand, Chris, why we are a country so endowed with fuel, energy, and we're paying such high energy prices.
I couldn't agree more.
It's a problem.
And good on you for saying it. Thanks for joining us. Joel Fitzgibbon there, former Labor Defence Minister. He knows what we got. He knows our resources, and he knows that they're going to make the country prosperous. But we're hurting ourselves.